OK. Bonjour à tout le monde, bienvenue. Je vais donner une brève introduction en français, puis en anglais. Après ça, je serai disponible à répondre à vos questions, anglais et français. Nous avons aussi un collègue, Stein Montero, sur la ligne pour répondre aux questions techniques concernant ce rapport. Alors, bon matin, je suis Daniel Bernhard et je dirige fièrement l'Institut pour la citoyenneté canadienne, un organisme à but non lucratif travaillant pour un Canada où les immigrants ne se contentent pas de venir, mais où ils restent, deviennent des citoyens et rendent le Canada plus fort, plus riche et plus vivant. Beaucoup de Canadiennes croient aujourd'hui que presque tous les problèmes politiques se limitent à l'immigration. Dernièrement, il est moins question de logements qui se construisent à une trop faible allure, mais plutôt que nous sommes trop encombrés par notre population immigrante. Ce n'est pas notre PIB par habitant qui n'est pas adéquat. Nous avons simplement trop d'habitants, diront certains. Apparemment, nos lacunes les plus préoccupantes disparaîtraient si seulement le Canada rétrécissait sa population, notamment en rejetant et en expulsant les immigrants les moins qualifiés. Aujourd'hui, nous lançons la 3e édition de notre étude des occasions manquées, qui examine la migration subséquente, c'est-à-dire le départ des résidents permanents, jusqu'au fin de l'année 2021. C'est la 4e année de suite que le taux de départ a augmenté. Pour ceux qui réclament que le système d'immigration privilégie la qualité à la quantité et qui demandent des réductions en matière d'immigration, ces données n'offrent aucune cause à célébrer. Les immigrants les plus compétents sont actuellement les moins susceptibles à rester. Le taux de départ sur 5 ans s'élève à 5 % en considérant toute la population immigrante. Mais pour les titulaires d'un doctorat, c'est 11 %. Pire encore, les mêmes professionnels dont nous avons le plus besoin sont ceux qui restent le moins longtemps. Parmi les 16 professions les plus en demande, 10 d'entre elles affichent des taux de rétention inférieurs à la moyenne. Le taux de départ pour les travailleurs en santé est 36 % au-dessus de la moyenne. Même chose pour les scientifiques. Pour les gestionnaires chevronnés, c'est 193 % plus élevé que la moyenne. Des professionnels en informatique, en IA, des gestionnaires en finance, en ingénierie et en architecture, ceux et celles qui pourraient bâtir pour le Canada l'économie et l'infrastructure de l'avenir nous quittent à un taux alarmant. Il devient encore plus difficile de doubler notre volume des exportations hors des États-Unis lorsque des immigrants chevronnés avec ces contacts mondiaux partent pour des pays concurrents. Le dernier budget fédéral propose des milliards de dollars pour attirer les meilleurs chercheurs du monde vers nos universités. Mais quelles seront les retombées si ces derniers choisissent de quitter le Canada après si peu de temps? Le gouvernement promet aujourd'hui des mines, des chemins de fer, des logements abordables, et ce, réalisés à une vitesse record. Mais nous perdons par ailleurs les professionnels expérimentés nécessaires à l'aboutissement de ces projets qui ont déjà une riche expérience à offrir grâce à la réalisation de ces mêmes projets ailleurs, mieux, plus rapidement et moins cher que le Canada pourrait réaliser à l'heure actuelle. 6,6 millions de personnes n'ont pas accès à un médecin de famille. Alors, c'est qui, au final, le perdant lorsque les immigrants qui travaillent en santé quittent le Canada? Même ceux qui préfèrent des réductions en immigration devraient appuyer un taux de rétention supérieur, car il ne faut pas remplacer les migrants qui restent ici parmi nous. C'est la 3e édition de ce rapport. Chaque année, la situation empire. Chaque année, nous mettons l'emphase sur un angle distinct et à chaque fois, nous découvrons un nouveau problème qui semble coûter plus cher au Canada que le précédent. Alors, je le dirais très, très simplement. Le Canada devient plus âgé, plus faible et plus pauvre et moins intéressant lorsque les immigrants talentueux nous quittent. C'est le moment pour une stratégie nationale de rétention. Aujourd'hui, le ministère de l'Immigration n'a aucun employé chargé de la rétention des immigrants recrutés par ses collègues. Cela doit changer. C'est impossible de juger la qualité d'une cohorte des immigrants tout juste au moment de leur arrivée. C'est mieux mesuré par le nombre de ceux qui restent, réussissent et contribuent à long terme. Finalement, le budget de 2025 nous indique que les services d'établissement seront reformés. Nous espérons que ces investissements seront réécalibrés vers des services éprouvés d'avancer la rétention des immigrants très qualifiés. Le Canada gagne lorsque les personnes les plus talentueuses du monde jouent pour notre équipe. Mais cette phrase n'est pas vraie au passé. L'objectif est un Canada fort, un Canada puissant, pas un Canada petit. Okay, now English. Thank you for coming. I'm Daniel Bernhard. I lead the Institute for Canadian Citizenship. We are a national charity that aspires to a Canada where talented people from around the world don't just come, but stay, become citizens, succeed, and contribute to our success over the long term. Many Canadians now seem to believe that almost every problem is just an immigration problem. We don't build housing too slowly. We just have too many people. Per capita GDP too low. Too much capita. Apparently, our most grieving shortcomings would simply subside if Canada would only shrink, particularly by weeding out lower-skilled immigrants. Well, today we launched the third Leaky Bucket report, which examines onward migration, that is to say, immigrants with permanent residence rights leaving Canada through to the end of the year 2021. It is the fourth consecutive year of rising departures. Yet, for those calling for the immigration system to prioritize quality over quantity, these findings give no cause for celebration. Today, we published data that make clear a startling fact. Canada's most capable immigrants are, in fact, most likely to leave. The 5-year departure rate for all permanent immigrants is about 5%, but for PhDs, it's 11%. Even worse, the professionals Canada needs most are those who stay least. Of the 16 most in-demand professions, 10 have retention rates that are below average, effectively reducing the contribution period for these people. The 5-year departure rate for immigrant healthcare workers is 36%. That's the same for scientists. The 5-year departure rate for experienced executives is 193% above average. Software developers, AI and cybersecurity professionals, managers in finance, engineering, architecture, the very people who can help Canada build the economy and infrastructure and housing of the future, all leave at above average rates. It will already be difficult to double our non-US trade volume, as the government has declared its intention to do. It gets that much harder when globally connected immigrants with global Rolodexes leave for competitor countries. Budget 2025 proposes billions to attract the world's best researchers to our universities. But what's the ROI if we can't retain them? We want to build mines and railways and housing and all at record speed, but we're losing seasoned immigrant professionals who have built these very same things elsewhere, better, faster, and for less money than Canada can today. 6.5 million people lack a family doctor. Who loses when immigrant professionals decide to leave? Immigrant healthcare professionals, I should say. Even those who want lower immigration should support better retention. The immigrant who stays is the immigrant who doesn't have to be replaced. We've done this report for 3 years now. The retention rate gets worse each time. Each year, there's a new focus area, and each year we find a new problem seemingly more costly to Canada than the last. So let me make this a little bit too clear. Canada grows older and weaker and poorer and less interesting when talented immigrants from around the world decide to leave. It's time for a national retention framework. IRCC currently has 0 staff devoted to retaining the people that their colleagues work so hard to recruit. This obviously has to change. The quality of an immigrant cohort can't just be judged on the day of arrival. A truer measure is how many stay, succeed, and contribute over time. Finally, Budget 2025 implies that there is a forthcoming renewal of settlement services. And we hope these reforms will shift funding towards programs with a proven ability to retain highly skilled immigrants, not just programs that support the most vulnerable. Canada wins when the most talented people from around the world decide to play for our team. But that sentence is not true in the past tense. The goal is Canada strong, not Canada small. Thank you very much. I'm happy to take any questions. And for technical questions about the report, we're joined by Dr. Stein Montero on the line, who's the principal author of this report with our research contractor, the Conference Board of Canada, who helped with the preparation of this document. Thank you.
From the, if I turn that on for our interpreter friends, Dave Baxter here from the Canadian Press. You talked a bit about just growing anti-immigrant sentiment, or like alluded to it off the top here. And even right now, we do have a federal government where their own polling is saying that most Canadians just think, yes, there's too many immigrants coming to Canada. There's too many immigrants here. So how do you try to convince a government to have a better retention framework when all the data they're looking at and what they're hearing from people is there's too many immigrants, slow it down? How do you get through to them with the message that we should be doing more to retain people?
Well, the fact is we live in a democracy, and occasionally in a democracy, public opinion becomes public policy. And that's what we've seen here, that there are increasing anxieties about immigration that are leading the government to slow down the rate of people that are coming into the country. But retention is not about the number who come in, it's about the number who stay. And so, as I said earlier, even people who believe that the level of immigration should be lower ought to support a better retention policy to make sure that people who are established here, who have already come, can stay, and we don't need new people to come in who may not succeed to the extent that they did. The other thing I'd say, though, is that adjusting immigration policy in response to changing public feelings is one thing, but the changing feeling does not change our needs. As I mentioned earlier, 6.5 million Canadians lack access to a family doctor. 28,000 people died in this country last year awaiting a medical procedure or diagnostic. Immigrant healthcare workers are leaving at 36% above the average rate. Like, who loses there? And so we have a story to tell. And I think the story ought to be a little bit different. We ought to emphasize that immigration is not just a favor that we do to immigrants. It's a service that we do to ourselves. We really, really, really need this talent, not just in healthcare, but in engineering and construction and global finance to make these connections around the world to double our non-US trade. Canada has aspirations to connect with the broader world, and immigrants help us to do that. So this is an advantage for Canada, and this report hopefully emphasizes the level of talent that is coming here, the degree of benefit that we stand to reap if we can retain this talent enthusiastically to play for our team.
And just one of the things the report mentions is, a big barrier for people staying here is pay and just being properly compensated, especially in these highly competitive fields on the global stage. How does a government strategy help square that that pay hole there?
So we are recruiting people based on their skills and their professional credentials and their education. And we say, all right, we're going to find the very best ones. And it's really competitive. I mean, the immigration system, the express entry system, turns away about 95, 96% of applicants. It's very, very hard. It's like Harvard University level admission rates in terms of the competitiveness. But once they get in the door, we say, all right, you're on your own. Good luck. And many of them, as you say, don't land in a good spot. And so we have these very, very qualified people who are doing jobs that they are overqualified for. The taxi driver still has a PhD, basically, despite us knowing about this problem for 50 years. This is a big loss for Canada. We spend not only a lot of time and money to process and screen these people and help provide settlement services, but we're counting on them to be able to address these needs. And if they're not able to find their way into those parts of the economy, then I think Canada loses out. It's wasted talent and wasted potential for our country. So there are a number of options here. One is to do better matching of the immigrant selection with actual needs in the labor market, potentially involving employers more in actually the selection process. But second is making sure that there are settlement services that are available for highly skilled people. Right now our settlement services emphasize language instruction, how to make a CV, for example. Many people don't need help with those things who come here. They have degrees from prestigious institutions that they did in English. They're just fine. What they need is help getting their credentials recognized. They need, pretty radical reform to bust through some of these issues that we've known have been holding us back for so long. But I think one of the reasons we don't do this is because we still think that it's a problem for them. We cry about, look at this doctor who's here, who's not able to practice. Now he's so sad, and we should feel badly for him. No, I want to talk about the grannies who can't walk up the stairs because they're waiting 3 years to get their hips done, and say, here's this person who could help, but we're not letting him work. We need to recognize the self-interest aspect of these things, and I think after that, many of the solutions become apparent.
And Laura?
Hey there, Laura Osman with The Logic. You've spoken about how this problem has gotten worse over the years. The most recent numbers, I think, are 2021 in the report. There's been some pretty aggressive changes to the immigration system announced in the last year. Do you have any sense of what impact that might have been? And can you give us a sense of the numbers kind of going back historically and what the impact has been over time?
Without getting year to year, and Stein might have some thoughts on this, the general trend is for about the last 40 years, onward migration has crept up kind of silently under the radar. As a country, it's like we couldn't countenance the possibility that people might want to leave. And so we never even bothered to look. I mean, this study is born of my personal ignorance. When I started doing this job, I said, all right, we're talking about how many people are coming. Well, how many are leaving? And nobody knew. The government didn't know, conference board didn't know, think tanks didn't know. So we decided to find out, and what we found is, yeah, actually this is a persistent trend that's been going up over the years. But it's sort of spiked in recent years, and as I mentioned in my remarks, 2021 was the fourth consecutive year of growing rate of onward migration, and given all the headlines that we've read in the intervening years, we can only expect that this will continue as the data become available for 22, 23, 24, 25. So this is not a crisis level, sky is falling, world is ending, no one wants to stay here issue. But it is, I think, a mounting concern that we're recruiting people, we're hand selecting people from around the world in a very competitive process for their ability to address our most pressing needs. Not their most pressing needs, our most pressing needs. And when they leave, our needs don't leave with them. And so retaining this talent really is a matter of national interest. We were talking just the other day about the Blue Jays, and they went on this great World Series run. And we didn't invite Alejandro Kirk and George Springer and Bo Bichette to come to Canada to do them a favor. They weren't down on their luck. We invited them so that our team would be as strong as it could be. And those guys wore the maple leaf on their chest when they went to work every day, and they played their hearts out for Canada, and we called them Canada's team, and we love them for it. I think a little bit of that same thinking would be very beneficial if we applied it more broadly across economy and society.
When it comes to Canada's plan for major projects, for turning to other countries to increase our exports, what does your research show in terms of how prepared we are? Do we have the necessary skills and talent in order to bring our export level to that next level, to increase trade with those countries if we're not looking at this pool of highly educated and skilled immigrants?
I would say we have a lot of talent here. We have a very highly educated population. But one of the major advantages is that the whole world is in Canada. And we don't do a good enough job of leveraging that network in the other direction. So we want to make more trade with India and China and the Philippines and Nigeria and growing economies outside of the United States. Well, we have hundreds of thousands of people who are in Canada. I mean, almost 1 million just from India admitted since 2015. Who were selected because they have this advanced professional experience, for example, in these other countries, which means they have advanced commercial networks in these other countries. We should be putting them at the fore of this of this adventure, of this goal that Canada has. And instead what we find are people are underemployed, discriminated against for not having Canadian experience, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, because we still think immigration is a favor we do for them, not an advantage we seize for ourselves. The same is true with infrastructure. Anyone who's been outside of North America recently will know that there are countries in the world that are making incredible advancements in the things that they're building. I mean, not just in China, in the Gulf countries, in all sorts of places. And they're building it better and faster and cheaper than we can. Sometimes because of things like, permissive labor laws that we don't want to replicate, but other times just because they have expertise. And we can get that expertise to play on our team, we have an advantage. So I say, let's go find the world's best. Like, the immigration department does not have to think of itself as the bouncer for Canada, as the security guard for Canada. It could think of itself as the headhunter for Canada, as the HR department for Canada. And as any good HR department knows, you don't just end your work once you sign the contract and hire the person. You have to integrate them and onboard them and make sure they succeed. And if they don't succeed right away, find another way for them to succeed. Those investments pay off mightily in the business context. We all know this, it's best practice, and they also will pay off mightily in the immigration context as well. There's a lot of talent that we are not putting to full use, and if we want to advance, we should take note of these professionals from other countries that can do it better, convince them that they should do it here.
You mentioned the word that a lot of these companies, when they're hiring, they look for Canadian experiences, and that's discriminatory, in which international experience should be valued. How much of that do you think is also premised on possible racism, or just in terms of short-sightedness, in terms of when we look at someone who is not, quote unquote, Canadian or not from here, that we do not think that they would be able to adapt?
I mean, I won't speculate on how much of it is racism. I'm sure some of it is, although we've heard these stories from white people from Australia and England, for example, who also find that their experience is not welcome here in Canada. I think the bigger issue is just arrogance. It's just arrogance. I mean, when we talk about Canadian experience, we're implying that Canadian experience is the best experience. Now, if someone's going to come and cut me open, I do want to make sure that they're able to do it to a certain standard. Obviously, that's important. I think we can all agree on that. But why should I assume that our standard is therefore the best standard, that that's the maximum? We have immigrants who come from other countries that we consider backward and undeveloped. And they come here and they look at us and they laugh and they say, how come your hospitals still run on fax machines? I saw one of those in a museum once. Like, you guys, do you know that the rest of the world doesn't use paper checks anymore? And that there's no fees for transferring money for people on your phone? Like, there are quote unquote developing countries that are totally cashless, that are way ahead of us. And so, again, this Canadian experience expectation, in some cases it's good. Obviously, we do have some standards. We want to verify that everyone can meet them in professional contexts. But to simply assume that that is the best there could be is just insular and arrogant and incorrect. And we make that error to our detriment. Yes, there's an impact on immigrants who don't get to contribute and who have a false promise. There is a moral or a karmic cost that we pay in peddling false hope to these people. But the real cost is completely avoidable self-defeat. And that's, I think, what we're trying to highlight today.
Sorry, we just have one person online. Stuart Benson, please go ahead.
Sorry, hi there. Just on some of the new changes, I guess, that have been made, or policy decisions that have been made. There is sort of talk about the H-1B visas. I think it was $1 billion that has been put forward around that for a program to sort of entice H-1B visa holders here. I just on the question of whether or not you think that's sort of moving in the right direction, or I guess to borrow the metaphor of the leaky bucket, without some of these suggestions, is that going to be at the very least much less efficient than it would be because we can get them here? But if they don't want to, if the issues that you suggest aren't addressed, that how long will they actually stay here? Are we sort of putting the cart before the horse on this one, or is it sort of you can do both things at the same time? How do you view sort of measures like that?
I think it's a good start. We should be trying to attract talented people from around the world to come to Canada. and contribute here. I mean, on the H-1B thing specifically, we have to first of all make sure that they come. I mean, last time we tried this in 2022 or 2023, I think it was only 12% of the people who actually claimed those visas ever turned up. So it became actually just an insurance policy. And of the ones who came, I'm not sure how many ended up staying. I think, though, there's just a real unfortunate limitation of imagination when it comes to this H-1B thing, because why only target people from the US? Like, why not think about just talented people everywhere? The H-1B program is a wonderful success. I mean, the CEOs of Google and Microsoft both came through H-1B. Many others that I'm not thinking of right now, and that is an example of the United States opening itself up to the world. And now that they're closing themselves up to the world, we say, haha, you're lost, right? This is silly. We're going to take some of those people. We don't have to wait for the United States to beat itself over the head with a hammer in order to realize that attracting talent from around the world, from the US or elsewhere, is a good idea for us. So I don't know why we'd only focus on like these sort of tech jobs. We should look at those. But like I said, we have needs in other areas. Healthcare is a big one. Infrastructure, engineering, architecture. Who's going to build the houses? How are we going to do that faster and cheaper? That's a conceptual frame that we could learn from. In Sweden, they build 90% of their houses in factories. There are people who know how to do this. They've solved our problems. They've just done it elsewhere. And to the extent that we can attract them to Canada and keep them in Canada, we can advance and benefit ourselves. That's it.
And if there are no more questions, this will conclude the press conference.
Oh, one more.
Oh, sorry.
A Baxter finale.
Yep. There's one more for Dr. Montero. Just can you just tell us a bit about the reason for the change in the methodology this year and how you're measuring like those out-of-country tax returns and how that may affect things going forward?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for the question. So what we've done differently in this report is to better utilize the people who said that they've been filing their taxes from abroad. So in previous reports, what we have worked with StatsCan to do is to simply just remove these people and focus on the onward migration rate for those who were either filing their taxes within Canada and those who did not file taxes at all, to identify the onward migration rate. So what we've done this year is we've utilized the non-resident tax filers in the data set as well. So it gives us a better estimate of people who might be filing from abroad. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that's all good there.
Thank you.
One
Can you
more.
take one more? Sorry.
Yeah.
In terms of the taxation, one of the things I'm wondering about, when you look at these statistics, does it appear that the rate of pay, like perhaps salaries are not as competitive, or taxes, or people are complaining about taxes and that's why they're moving somewhere else? Or is it just in terms of wanting that upward career growth?
So I think there are two ways to look at this, and we've tried at the Institute for Canadian Citizenship to study both ways. When we ask people why they intend to leave, we tend to get macroeconomic answers that are the same complaints that aggrieve all Canadians. No surprises here, right? Like, housing's too expensive, the price of food's going up, the wait time for medical care is too slow. Many actually complain about the quality of education or the lack of rigor in the education system. So these are the same things that many Canadians complain about, and those are the answers that we hear when we ask people who leave. But then we thought, that's not really as interesting as it could be, and it's not very actionable. And so we thought, all right, what if we ask people why they stay? And when we find out why they stay, there are two factors that really stand out. The first is optimism for the future. It's not so much, is my income high enough, or can I make more money in the US or somewhere else? Because we see, there are a lot of people from the US who want to come to Canada now, even though that they can make more money. The optimism for the future is saying, do I have credible hope that I'll maybe make more tomorrow than I do today? Have I seen proof that my situation can and will improve? Do I feel like this country is on the right track, that I can trust people to do the right thing? Those kinds of questions. That's the first one. And the second is a sense of Canadian identity and belonging. The statisticians, they do all kinds of fancy stats stuff that I don't entirely understand. But they tell me on good authority that a 1% increase in identity and belonging in Canada translates to a 25% increase in the propensity for somebody to stay. And so think about it. There's always a better job with better money someplace else. If that was really the only thing, then you'd just be hopping around the world and probably everybody would end up in Doha or something like that. But we don't want to live there because we want to do things like vote. We want to do things like volunteer and play sports with our neighbors and have our kids play together and go to barbecues and go to crazy, Canadian Premier League finals where it's snowing like crazy and everyone's having a great time. These are the kinds of things that actually make a country worth staying in. There are some bare minimum necessities that need to be met, and some sense of economic optimism has to be present. But actually, it's everything else that makes Canada sticky, we found. And so that's actually a good thing, because it means we don't entirely have to rely on the government to do this policy better or make this adjustment. Each of us, when you invite your immigrant neighbor for a barbecue, or your kids play together, or you're inviting your colleague for lunch, these types of things are small actions that each of us can take to ensure that this talent is retained in Canada and working for Canada's success. There are policies and services that can be elaborated. Our Canoe program, which gives newcomers free access to over 2,000 culture, nature, and sport experiences across the country. We do about 1,200 of those experiences every day last year. That's one example, but we can also do this individually, and that's, I think, for me, empowering. At least we don't have to wait for the government to solve this all from the top down for us. All right. Last call? All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.